Greetings, Dr. Mark Winton here from the University of Central Florida Department of Criminal Justice, and I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about our profiling course here. So what we're basically doing is we're trying to figure out what type of person commits a specific crime. And what we're going to do is look at different types of profiling, and we'll see that throughout the semester in our textbook and also in the YouTube videos. But what I'd like to do is spend a few minutes just talking about some of the major parts of criminal profiling. And of course, the goal is to integrate all these parts into a report and a document or suggestions for investigating the crime. First of all, we want to identify the crime. How do we label that crime? What type of crime is it? How do we classify it? And what are the features related to that crime so that we can agree that this crime is this type? And I'll give you an example where sometimes we have some ambiguity, and that would be, for example, terrorism. That there's a lot of debate over the definitions of terrorism. What is terrorism? What is not terrorism? And some situations and behaviors are more likely to be clearly delineated as terrorism, and others become more debatable. But we want to go ahead and define that crime. We want to, specify what type of crime occurred. Also, we will look at the crime scene and conduct a crime scene analysis. We want to know how many crime scenes are there. There may be multiple crime scenes. We want to look at what forensic evidence was left at the crime scene. We want to ask, was there staging at that scene? We also want to try to determine the time frame when that crime occurred. And there's a whole lot of other factors too that we'll look at when we do crime scene analysis. We also want to take a look at the victim. We want to try to understand that victim's life. We want to look at the demographics, the relationships, the behaviors, routines, social life, work life, all these factors that go into looking at the victim. And often by understanding that victim, we can get some insight about the perpetrator. If we look at the victimology, what happened to that victim, and that may give us some insight and help with the investigation. We also want to try to assess what the offender characteristics might be. We want to look at the motive, the level of organization, the social and psychological factors, the demographic factors, the behavioral patterns. Furthermore, putting together what we have, we'll come up with interviewing strategies that we can recommend based on what type of particular offender we might be dealing with. In addition, it would be important to analyze technology. And so this would include cell phone data, computer analysis, analysis of hard drives, for example, of thumb drives. Also, social media analysis is very important to do nowadays. When I first started teaching and studying profiling, we didn't worry about that part because basically we didn't have the internet. We didn't have social media. Things have changed dramatically, and the complexity of how we communicate using all kinds of different tools has also become something to consider in the profiling course. And we also want to offer suggestions for law enforcement investigation, what they might want to take a look at and so forth. And we want to take a look at available reports that we might have access to: autopsy reports, police reports, witness interviews, mental health evaluations, things of that nature might be helpful if they're available. And also, we want to see if we can link that particular crime to other particular crimes. Do we have a serial offender in that situation? We also will take a look at geographic factors that are relevant to the crime. And we have a lot more capabilities using technology to look at those factors, whether it be crime mapping or tracking, identification of automobiles, license plate readers. I mean, there's a whole host of factors that are related to technology and profiling now. And often we will be asked to, if we're working on a particular case, we might be asked, what are the future risks to the public? So we basically are doing a threat assessment. A lot of times when there's, if you're walking through a neighborhood and there's, 4 or 5 police cars and there's a crime scene, people want to know what happened. But people also want to know, do they need to be worried that there might be a dangerous person nearby, that they want to know about that? And often law enforcement will, say there's no risk to the community based on this particular crime, which would mean that that they have accounted for the offender and there's no longer a risk. And also, we want to be able to integrate all this. And we will revisit our ideas, our hypotheses, our conclusions, and make changes as necessary. So it's very important to recognize the limitations of criminal profiling. This whole course is a course providing you tools that would help you in understanding crime. I've worked a lot of cases before as a counselor working at private agencies as well as state-funded agencies. And one of the things that I would mention is that whatever work I did that was related to profiling, I was never identified as a profiler. I was identified most likely as a clinician that had a background in criminal justice and could provide some insight or maybe a small piece of that puzzle to law enforcement or the state attorney's office to help them with the case. That a lot of times crimes are solved by good police work and also accurate witnesses who can provide law enforcement with useful information and leads. And so I don't want you to get the impression that there's a whole group of criminal profilers that go out there and quickly and rapidly resolve crimes. No, that's not how it works. That we're providing information to assist, and so I guess what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to avoid a false impression that we might see in the media of how criminal profilers actually act. And also, it's relatively rare to run into a person who identifies themselves as a criminal profiler. I don't identify myself as a criminal profiler. I might be introduced as one in the media or something like that, but I consider myself a criminologist who happens to teach and study criminal profiling, but a criminologist and a sociologist for all practical purposes, since that's what my doctorate's in sociology. But the whole thing here is that we have to recognize the limitations, and we have to be very careful in not overreaching with our conclusions and recognizing that we could be inaccurate. I think that's real important. And then finally, we have a lot more research now, especially in the last 10 years. We've been able to look at larger data sets, and researchers have conducted complex statistical analysis to give us a lot more insight into understanding offenders. So there's really a lot going on. It's an exciting field. And again, we're providing tools that will assist in understanding crime and investigating crimes. And this wraps up this video. Thank you.